Life in solitude. Ethan Cole lived on the outskirts of Cedar Valley, where the forest swallowed the horizon and the nearest neighbor was a mile away. His cabin, weathered and sturdy, bore the marks of decades of self-reliance. Rough-hewn beams, a stone chimney streaked with soot, and windows that framed nothing but towering pines. Inside, the air was scented with pine smoke and the faint trace of herbs he dried for tea. Life here was simple, predictable, and, most importantly, solitary. He shared this solitude with Lila, his 12-year-old daughter. Blind from birth, she navigated the cabin with uncanny ease, memorizing the location of every table, chair, and jar of preserves. Ethan often watched her as she traced her fingers along the worn edges of furniture, a quiet smile on her lips, her trust in him absolute. He had always promised her a safe life, away from the chaos he had once known in the world beyond these woods. Their mornings began before sunrise. Ethan would chop wood, the rhythmic swing of the axe punctuating the dawn. Lila, bundled in layers of knitted sweaters, sat by the window, her hands in the dirt of a small indoor herb garden. "Good morning, Papa," she said, her voice calm but bright, sensing his presence rather than seeing it. "Morning, Lila," he replied, pausing to wipe sweat from his brow. "Breakfast soon." Their routine was a shield against the past. Ethan rarely spoke of it, but Lila's perceptiveness often filled in the gaps. He had once loved and lost, profoundly and painfully, leaving scars that had hardened him. Romance had been a stranger, even unwelcome. And yet, watching Lila, he sometimes felt a faint ache of longing, not for himself, but for a world she had yet to see. The forest outside teemed with life, though Ethan's world was careful and controlled. Deer grazed at dawn, foxes darted among the trees, and the wind carried the whisper streams. The isolation was both protective and stifling. Lila sometimes asked questions about towns, schools, and other children. Ethan would answer patiently, weaving stories to fill the gaps of her imagination. He knew the day might come when she would demand to step beyond their boundary, but for now, the forest was enough. It was on one of these quiet mornings that an unfamiliar sound reached them, a sharp, anguished cry, piercing the tranquility. Lila froze, her small hands clenched. "Papa, someone's hurt." Ethan's instincts snapped to attention. He dropped the axe and motioned for Lila to stay behind. Grabbing his coat and a sturdy pair of boots, he moved toward the source of the sound, ears straining. The cries grew louder, frantic, coming from the old trail leading toward the Hartman ranch. There, tangled in a cruel steel contraption, was a man, mid-30s, strong but clearly in pain. A bear trap had clamped onto his ankle. His name, as Ethan would soon learn, was Lucas Hartman. "Please help," he gasped, blood streaking the dirt beneath him. Ethan's hands were steady as he approached, assessing the trap. Lila's voice, soft yet insistent, called from the cabin. "Papa, he's scared. Don't let him hurt himself more." Her intuition and concern for others often belied her youth. Ethan nodded silently, appreciating her counsel even without words spoken aloud. Working carefully, Ethan freed Lucas from the trap. Pain etched every line of the man's face, but in his eyes was something more than fear. Gratefulness, surprise, and a spark of something unspoken that lingered even as he leaned on Ethan for support. Lila's small hand brushed Lucas's arm in comfort, a gesture pure and instinctive, and he looked down at her with a tenderness that made Ethan tighten his jaw. By the time they had guided Lucas to the cabin, the morning sun had fully risen, casting long shadows across the forest floor. He sat by the fire, his coat damp with mud, while Ethan cleaned the wound and bandaged it with meticulous care. Silence fell for a moment, broken only by the crackle of the fire. Lucas's gaze lingered on Lila, then on Ethan, and a faint smile flickered. I don't know how to thank you." Ethan's reply was terse but careful. "You're lucky it wasn't worse. Rest now. We'll talk later." As Lucas drifted into exhaustion, Ethan stepped outside, the wind ruffling his hair. Something had shifted, a ripple in the quiet pond of his life. The forest remained unchanged, the cabin still sturdy, But now, the solitude felt less complete, as if fate had delivered a visitor whose presence would challenge everything Ethan had carefully protected. And for the first time in years, he allowed himself a quiet thought, unspoken even to Lila. Maybe some changes, however unwelcome, were meant to happen. The rescue and ripple. Lucas Hartman woke to the faint scent of pine, smoke curling through the cabin window. The morning light filtered softly across the wooden floorboards, illuminating dust motes that danced in the quiet. His ankle throbbed, a dull reminder of the bear trap, yet the pain was secondary to the curiosity stirring inside him. He had never expected kindness like this. Unprompted, raw, and entirely unassuming. Ethan was already moving through the cabin, collecting firewood and refilling Lila's breakfast plate. Lila hummed softly, arranging herbs on the counter as if orchestrating a small, unseen symphony. Lucas watched them from the corner, a strange blend of gratitude and discomfort twisting his chest. He felt the intrusion of an emotion he had carefully buried for years. Admiration. "Morning," Ethan said without looking up, his voice steady, carrying the weight of authority and habitual caution. "You slept well." Lucas tried to mask his vulnerability. "Better than I have in months." The lie came naturally. He had never known such quiet care. Ethan's eyes flicked toward him briefly. "Good. Breakfast will be ready shortly. Your leg will need rest." Lila, sensing the tension in the room, moved closer to Lucas, her hands grazing his shoulder lightly. "Papa is right," she said softly. "You need to be careful. The forest isn't kind to carelessness." Her tone was gentle, yet her insight seemed to pierce deeper than most fully sighted adults could manage. Lucas felt a warmth at her words, realizing that even in blindness, she perceived far more than he ever had. After breakfast, Ethan insisted on tending to Lucas's wound again. The bandages needed replacing, the ankle massaged and wrapped with careful precision. "You should thank your luck, not me," Ethan said, his eyes focused, unwavering. Lucas tried to meet his gaze but faltered. Ethan's presence was commanding, quiet, and oddly comforting. "You make it sound simple," Lucas murmured, wincing as Ethan applied pressure. "A bear trap. It could have ended badly." Ethan's lips pressed thin. "Things like that are why you respect the woods. And respect is easier to learn before you're alone out there." Hours passed, and Lucas found himself lingering in the cabin, watching the father-daughter duo. There was a rhythm here, a life measured by routine, simplicity, and unspoken understanding. He contrasted it with his own home, the Hartman estate, where his wife Sophia's ambition left little room for tenderness, conversation, or warmth. Lucas swallowed a bitter truth he rarely admitted. He was lonely, emotionally parched, and entirely unprepared for the unexpected intimacy of Ethan and Lila's world. By late afternoon, Lucas insisted he could walk to the edge of the trail. Ethan, cautious but silent, allowed it. Lila offered her hand, guiding him through the uneven terrain, whispering directions with precision. "Left, watch the roots, step lightly," she instructed. The trust Lucas felt toward this child, trust born not of obligation, but of instinct, stirred a longing he had not recognized in years. "Why do you live all the way out here?" Lucas asked, voice quiet as the forest around them. Ethan hesitated. "Life is simpler, less messy. You learn to value the little things." "And do you ever regret it?" "Staying away." Lucas pressed gently. Ethan's eyes darkened briefly, a shadow passing over his face. "Sometimes, but the world can be unforgiving. I protect what I have. That's enough." Lucas looked at Lila, seeing her curious eyes, attentive despite her blindness. She was a mirror of innocence, yet she held a wisdom that unnerved him. Ethan noticed the glance and stiffened slightly, protective instincts flickering beneath the calm surface. The conversation lingered between them, unspoken questions hovering like mist. Lucas realized he wanted more than gratitude. He wanted connection, a bond he had neglected for years. Ethan, meanwhile, found himself observing the man closely, noting the subtle gestures, the way he flinched under pressure, and the quiet humility beneath his strong frame. It was an intrusion into a life carefully maintained, yet neither could deny the magnetism forming between them. As dusk fell, the shadows lengthened across the cabin floor. Lucas limped toward the door to leave, but paused, hesitant. I should go, he said. Ethan's reply was calm, but firm. The forest is dangerous. Stay a while. Rest. Lucas's gaze flicked to Lila, who smiled gently. We're here. No one gets hurt here. The promise lingered, unspoken yet binding. Lucas stepped back reluctantly, aware that something fundamental had shifted, something he could neither name nor resist. The quiet of the cabin, the care of a father, the insight of a child. It was foreign and intoxicating all at once. As Lucas disappeared down the trail toward his ranch, both he and Ethan carried a shared understanding. Life would not return to its prior solitude. Something new had begun, a thread that would pull tighter, testing boundaries, stirring desires, and threatening the stability each of them had so carefully built. The stirring of desire. Days passed, yet Lucas Hartman found the image of the cabin, of Ethan and Lila, lingering in his thoughts like a persistent echo. Each chore at his ranch, the shifting of feed bags, the cleaning of stables, the endless grind of livestock care, felt dull and hollow compared to the warmth he had glimpsed in their secluded world. He had lived a life of routine, constrained by a marriage that felt more like arrangement than affection. Yet now he craved something unnameable, raw, and real. Ethan's world, in contrast, remained disciplined and ordered. Yet he too felt the subtle pull, a curiosity he had long suppressed, tugging at the edges of his solitude. He watched Lila one afternoon as she traced the lines of a freshly painted fence post, and a fleeting glance caught his mind wandering to Lucas's presence. The easy confidence, the understated charm, the vulnerability beneath the rugged exterior. He chided himself silently. He was a father, a protector, and a man who had endured heartbreak. Desire was a dangerous indulgence, one that could disrupt the delicate balance of their life. But fate has a way of testing boundaries. Lucas returned under the pretext of gratitude. He brought supplies, flour, sugar, fresh bread, and insisted on helping Ethan with chores, claiming it was the least he could do. The cabin, once still and predictable, now hummed with tension beneath the surface. Their conversations grew longer, more personal. Lucas spoke of distant travels, of dreams abandoned, and the subtle regrets that gnawed at him quietly. Ethan listened with the patience of a man who had witnessed life's betrayals, but found himself drawn nonetheless to the candidness in Lucas's tone. Why do you stay here, Ethan? Lucas asked one evening, his voice low and unguarded as he leaned against the cabin's doorway. You could leave, travel, see the world, be with someone who... Ethan interrupted with a soft laugh that carried more shadow than humor. I've seen enough of the world to know it can hurt. Here, I protect what matters. That's enough. Lucas's gaze lingered on him, unyielding. He wanted to argue, to peel back the layers of caution and solitude. Yet something in Ethan's eyes, steady, unwavering, kept him at bay. That did not stop the ache of longing. Lila, perceptive despite her blindness, noticed the subtle shifts. She would nudge Ethan when he lingered too long on Lucas's presence or ask pointed questions about Lucas's life, her words innocent yet probing. Papa, does he come here often? He seems lonely. Ethan stiffened but said nothing, choosing silence as a shield. Lila, however, smiled knowingly. Children often perceive truths adults obscure. Her intuition was sharper than most realized. The tension reached a subtle crescendo one late afternoon when Lucas offered to assist Ethan in repairing a section of the fence near the edge of the forest. The work required close proximity, and with each exchanged tool and shared glance, the air between them thickened. Words became scarce, meaning passed in gestures, in the brush of a hand over rough timber, in eyes locking for a moment too long. Lucas's pain from the bear trap was mostly healed, but a different kind of ache had taken root, a craving for connection, intimacy, and understanding he had not felt in years. Ethan, aware of the undercurrent, maintained his composure outwardly. Yet beneath the calm, he wrestled with emotions he had buried for a decade. The cautious rationality that had defined his life now quivered under the intensity of desire and moral ambiguity. He reminded himself constantly of Lila, of the responsibility he bore, yet the magnetism of Lucas's presence was undeniable. Dinner that evening was quiet, save for the soft clatter of dishes. Lila chattered about her day, oblivious to the tension threading the adults' interactions. She sat close to Ethan, her small hand occasionally brushing his, grounding him, a subtle reminder of the life he must protect. Lucas observed, noticing the unspoken bond, and it only deepened the intrigue. He wondered what it would be like to breach the barriers of such a protected world, to step into the space that felt forbidden yet tantalizing. As night fell and Lucas departed, a silence lingered in the cabin. Ethan stared into the dying fire, wrestling with thought and desire. The day had passed, yet nothing felt the same. The presence of Lucas had stirred currents in their secluded life that would not easily settle. Outside, the forest whispered in the dark, carrying secrets and possibilities alike. Something had shifted, lines blurred, boundaries questioned, and emotions awakened. Ethan and Lucas both understood, in that unspoken moment, that their lives had been irrevocably altered. The solitary peace Ethan had cultivated was under gentle siege, and the world of desire and temptation had crept quietly through the cabin door. And somewhere in the quiet, Lila slept, blissfully unaware, yet somehow aware, as if she knew that life would soon challenge the quiet certainties of her father's world. Choices and consequences. The sun hung low over Cedar Valley, casting a golden haze across the cabin and the forest beyond. Ethan Cole stood on the porch, arms crossed, gaze fixed on the distant tree line where shadows stretched long and uncertain. Lila sat nearby, gently brushing the braided strands of her hair, her small frame tense, as if she sensed the storm in Ethan's mind. The calm routine of their life had been irrevocably disrupted by Lucas Hartman, whose presence lingered like a subtle current, pulling at their carefully constructed solitude. Lucas arrived just as the horizon burned with amber and violet. His gait was slower now, cautious not only because of the old injury to his ankle, but because of the invisible barrier between himself and Ethan. He carried no tools or gifts this time, only his own hesitation and an unspoken need for clarity. The silence stretched, filled with the weight of decisions unmade. Lucas began, then faltered. Words felt inadequate. He had been living a lie, constrained by a marriage devoid of warmth. And yet the bond he felt with Ethan was raw, urgent, and impossible to ignore. I can't stop thinking about us. Ethan's expression remained composed, though inside his chest a tempest roared. He stepped closer, voice steady yet tinged with restrained emotion. Lucas, you know what this is. We live carefully for a reason. I have Lila. She comes first. And you have responsibilities. You can't simply walk away. Lucas swallowed, nodding slowly. I know, but for the first time in years, I feel alive. And I can't pretend that what I feel isn't real. Lila's small voice cut through the tension. Papa, if he's hurting, maybe he needs someone who cares. But we must be careful. Her wisdom, though softly spoken, carried the weight of truth. Ethan looked at her, gratitude mingled with unease. She had always been his moral compass, and now, subtly, she guided him through the complexities of desire and right. The cabin felt smaller, the air heavier, as unspoken longing hovered like mist. Ethan studied Lucas, the determination in his posture, the vulnerability in his gaze, the tension coiled like a spring. Something shifted, a quiet acknowledgement. The emotional intimacy they had shared could no longer be contained. Yet crossing that boundary meant consequences neither could fully predict. They worked together silently that evening, repairing a section of the fence damaged by a recent storm. Hands brushed over rough wood, eyes met briefly, and the air hummed with unvoiced desire. Each gesture was a negotiation, a cautious test of limits. Lucas's laughter broke through occasionally, light and unrestrained, a stark contrast to the burdens he carried elsewhere. Ethan allowed himself a small smile, a crack in the stoic armor he had worn for so long. Dinner was subdued, the three sitting together as dusk deepened. Lila's voice carried her usual curiosity, but she sensed the tension between the adults and left the room early, her soft footsteps retreating up the stairs. Alone now, Ethan and Lucas faced the inevitability they had skirted for weeks. "I want this," Lucas whispered, close enough that Ethan could feel the heat of his breath. "But I don't want to destroy everything. I don't know what to do." Ethan's response was deliberate, careful. "Life is full of choices, Lucas. Some are easy. Some carry consequences you can't undo. You need to decide what kind of man you want to be, for yourself, for your family, for anyone who trusts you." Lucas's hands trembled slightly as he reached for Ethan's. It was a gesture of connection, of defiance against the rigid walls they had both constructed. The tension broke subtly, emotionally if not physically. In that quiet cabin, two men weighed, longing against morality, desire against responsibility. Night fell, and the forest beyond the cabin whispered secrets in the wind. Lucas eventually left, pausing at the trailhead. He looked back once, seeing Ethan standing on the porch, arms crossed yet unrelaxed, Lila's soft silhouette behind him. "I'll figure it out," he said quietly. Ethan watched him disappear into the shadows, knowing the choice was not his alone to make. The solitude he had cherished was altered, yet not destroyed. The quiet, the protection of Lila, the rhythm of their life, all remained, albeit interwoven now with the potential for change, for love, and for risk. As the door closed behind him, Ethan exhaled deeply, leaning against the frame. Lila approached silently, her small hand on his arm. "He cares, Papa," she said softly. "And so do you." Ethan nodded, feeling the weight of her insight. He had faced heartbreak, isolation, and the certainty of control. But now, something new had begun, uncertain, delicate, and profoundly human. And though the path ahead would demand choices, courage, and careful navigation, for the first time in years, Ethan allowed himself to believe that happiness, however complicated, was possible. The night embraced the cabin, peaceful yet brimming with unspoken possibilities. For Ethan, Lila, and even Lucas, life would never be the same. But the future held the quiet promise of connection, growth, and love born from both struggle and choice.